After we got out of his taxi with his pet driver out there, and on our own, we agreed that we would forget the whole thing and we wouldn't talk to them. That's none of their damn business, you know. So we proceeded to Switzerland. And strange things happened on that trip out. We're all three together now, and we take the boat train across to the Dunkirk side, and there's a big line of people at all of the customs gates. And we're standing there at the end of this long line. Looks like it's going to take a time. We have to catch a train after that. And a customs officer in uniform came out of a dark booth, came down to us, tapped Mr. Elder on the shoulder and says, "Come with me," you know. And he just indicated that. We followed him. He went to an empty customs booth, went inside, turned on the light, and motioned for us to come through. So we did, presented our passports. He looked at them, stamped them without even giving them a heavy look. And then he motioned us for us to go on. He came out of the booth, turned out the lights, and walked away. And everybody else in the line just looking at us like, who are they? What did they do? And we're thinking, well, gee, this is great, because now we get a good seat on the train down there. If we were last, we'd have to probably stand up or sit on our baggage. So we got down on the train, picked out a nice compartment, and put our baggage around, and we were comfortable all the way across to France and into Switzerland. These kind of things just seem to happen all the time. There was one time when we came out of Switzerland, and I was carrying 150 pictures I'd gotten from Billy. And we got on we went to Basel on the Swiss train, and they changed trains there. You get off the Swiss train, get on a French train, side by side on the tracks. And this time when we got on the French train, as we came to our car, where our car number was, our compartment number on the car, and we had a car number and a compartment number. As we entered the car, there's a French officer sitting at the end of the car where you go on, blocking the entrance to the car, and he moved his chair back, pulled his legs in, and we went in and sat down. We were waiting for the train to start. It was going to go in about 20 minutes, and we don't hear any other voices in the car with us. So Lee got up and walked down to the end to see if we're on a train that's going to leave, and the police officer said, yes, the car behind us was full of people, and some of them standing up wanting to get in, and the police officer was shooing them back. So he went down to the other end of the car, and there was another French officer sitting there blocking that entrance, and people in the other car wanting to get in. And he came back and he says, I don't know what's going on here, but we're the only ones on the car. And he says, they're keeping the others out. I said, well, why don't we just relax and enjoy it? And so we went all the way across France that way, and when we got to Dunkirk, we got off the train. We were the only ones to leave that car, and got on the boat, the ferry across to England again. This time, we could have caught any one of several trains out of Dunkirk, because they leave about every 2 hours. And if we had any kind of a delay, we could be on the following train. And so we get on the train and we get to London, get to Victoria Station. When we come up the stairs from the train level in the main terminal there at Victoria, here's the big black taxi driver, and he says, the boss is waiting. And he put us in the same taxi, and he drove us to the same place, Grosvenor House. And this time the guy says, can I see the pictures? Somehow he knew we had pictures. And I handed him the pictures, and he looked at them, and he handed them to another man sitting beside his desk. The man looked at them, and he handed them back to him, and the man handed them to another man that came from outside, and the pictures left the room. And we didn't plan to go there. We were abducted by our CIA. So that time, they brought the pictures back in about a half an hour and gave them to us, and they drove us back to the Kensington apartment that the old gunner had. We always tried to keep that open, because in case we didn't have anything else. And then another time we came out, we were picked up by the same cab driver, and this time we were the three of us together again, we were taken to another place, and I can't remember. In the afternoon, Admiral, our intelligence officer at the time, a 3-star admiral, and his name escapes me completely, arrived in an escort of cars with security guards, drove up, and he got out and came up to a room on the 4th floor on the other side. And so we still wonder whether our being there had anything to do with him being there. But after we left that and asked people out in the street what the building was, they said, well, you don't know? We said, well, what kind of a hotel is it? He says, that's a safe house, a CIA safe house. So we were in there. And when we went down to pay our bill to leave 2 days later, the guy behind the counter said, it's all paid. Don't worry about it. And so we neither registered nor did we pay out. We stayed there for 3 days in the CIA safe house, and they drove us back to Victoria Station, and we caught the train back, the subway back to the airport. That's the kind of surveillance we were under. And one time when we were coming back out, we were coming across the continent, and the train stopped in Brussels. And Lee and I and Britt were on the train in Brussels, and Britt looked out the window, and across on the next track from us in the railroad station was signboards on a train that said Amsterdam. She said, didn't you have a case going on in Amsterdam? I said, yes, the Dennerdy case. She said, well, why don't we go down and meet him? So we said, oh, why not? We grabbed our baggage, got off the train, went around the end of the platform and got on the other train, and just as we're getting on the other train, through the windows we could see the train we left pulling out. And we just got seated in the train that we had just got onto, and it pulled out. And that was in Brussels in the middle of the night. And we got to Amsterdam about 10:30 at night or something like that. And we got up early the next morning, and we went down to the trolley station and caught a trolley to Den Haag, where Mr. Dennerdy lived, and got off the trolley. And we're going to walk to his house, which is only about 3 or 4 city blocks, not very far. But as we got off the trolley at Mariahove, the station that we get off at, went down 2 flights of stairs, there's American troops all around the place, and American military vehicles. And an American sergeant stopped us and says, where are you going? He said, well, we want to visit a friend over here who lives in this residential district. He says, what are you doing? We said, oh, just visiting. We said, what are you guys doing here? He said, well, we're looking for a penetration. We said, what kind of a penetration? He said, well, there's a problem here. He said, there's a signal coming in every afternoon about 4 o'clock that we haven't been able to locate. We've got detector equipment here. We're trying to catch it and find out where it's coming from, because the signal is in a highly sensitive area where atomic warheads are stored in this vicinity. And we said, oh, we don't know anything about that. He said, well, keep an eye out. And we walked down to the house, and we were visiting Mr. Dennerdy, who had been taking notes, contact notes for some time. And as we're sitting there talking to him, we asked him how he got the contact notes, how they came in. He said, I was thinking they're going to be like Mr. Myers. And he leaned back in his chair, and he said, well, I usually leave the office about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I get home, make me a cup of tea, sit down in my chair, his chair. He was a millionaire, auto parts manufacturer. And he had an arm that pulled up and swung around in the front and made a little desk in his lounge chair. And he said, I sat down here with a pad and pencil and to make notes while I'm drinking my tea. And he says, strangely, after my contacts with the aliens in the oost shells, he said, ever since that, if I'm going to get a message at all, I get it about that time, and it comes in by a form of automatic writing in a rapid way. And he'd write pages, sometimes dozens of pages of these notes, and sometimes he'd get sketches this way. And he said it starts about 4 o'clock, runs about an hour and 15 minutes. Now we're thinking what the American sergeant told us. He says it starts about 4 o'clock, runs about an hour, and we can't pin it down. It comes in from straight down. So, and he said, we asked him, well, how do you receive it? Do you hear something in your ears or what? He said, well, when I was aboard the craft, I sat under what looked like a screen cone overhead, and he said, I heard sounds and pictures were projected on the screen. He says, now they're projected in the back of my eyes. He said, I see the images in front of me, but there's no screen. But he'd been taking these notes for a long time, and it was from those that we wrote the book Contact from IARGA, Planet IARGA. Anyway, all of this was going on around us, and on the trip through Brussels, where we changed trains unexpectedly and suddenly, where we got off the train, when we got into the case officer's office, that trip out, picked up, abducted by them again. This time when we're ushered into the office, he slammed his fist on the arm of the chair and said, just what the hell do you think you're doing? We said, what do you mean? What do we think we're doing? He says, who taught you to sanitize the trail like that? He said, how did you give my best agents a slip? He said, there was an agent in the car on each side of you, and you disappeared in the middle of the trip